Signed and sealed, the Napthine government enters a contract to build the East-West toll road. A Sydney man murdered in Afghanistan. Authorities say he was singled out because he was Australian. Hong Kong comes to a standstill as tens of thousands make a stand for democracy. And dozens feared dead in Japan as hikers failed to outrun an erupting volcano. Good evening, Ian Henderson with ABC News. The Napthine government today signed the contracts for the first stage of the East-West Link tollway. The Premier says the project will now proceed quickly, but much of the deal remains sketchy. The contracts with a consortium headed by Lendlease were finalised soon after the High Court today rejected a bid to delay the signing until mid-October. We're joined now by our state politics reporter, Frances Bell. Frances, what do we know about what's in those contracts?
Well, very little, Ian. The government was giving very little away after it signed the contracts late this afternoon. We do know that Lendlease, the head of that winning consortium, East West Connects, made a statement to the Australian Stock Exchange this afternoon saying it had signed a $5.3 billion contract with the government to build the first stage of the East-West Link. But very little other crucial information has been forthcoming so far. They include the final business case justifying the project, how much Victorian taxpayers will contribute to this project over the 25-year life of the contract, and also how much Victorian taxpayers would have to pay in compensation if Labor was to win the election and rip up the contracts. Now, we were told by both the Transport Minister Terry Moulder and the Premier Denis Napthine this afternoon that more information will be released tomorrow. That includes the final design and route of the first stage of the project. This is what they had to say this afternoon.
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning?
Yes. We'll do an official presentation in the morning of the following route. And I think it's important to understand with the documents that have been signed today, there's certain commercial information that will be redacted. That work will be undertaken by Linking Melbourne Authority. And my understanding is it would possibly go up on the website in 2 to 3 weeks.
Lift the contract?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, Frances, to what extent will today's signings tie Labor's hands? Does it still have room to move?
Well, Ian, Labor is maintaining that it will not build this road if it wins the election, and it's accusing the government of arrogance and desperation for signing these contracts just 2 months out from that November state poll. The government, on the other hand, is saying that it is simply sticking to the timeline that it set 18 months ago when it committed to building the first stage of the East-West Link, and it will be painting Labor and Daniel Andrews as risky and reckless for the position it's taking on not honouring these contracts if it wins. So both sides taking a very different approach to this project in the lead up to the election.
And what about the courts, Frances? Will they still have a say about the ultimate fate of East-West Link?
Well, not before the election, Ian. We still have the case brought by the Yarra and Moreland councils, which argues that the government breached its own planning regulations in approving this project, and that is the case that Labor is relying on to argue that these contracts are not valid. But that case will not be heard until well after the election in December. Now, also today, both the High Court and the Court of Appeal threw out an application for an injunction brought by Brunswick resident Tony Murphy, which sought to delay the signing of these contracts. So that application was thrown out, which allowed the government to sign these contracts late this afternoon. Now, our reporter Ashlyn McGee has more on that story.
It was an 11th hour bid to delay the signing. The request for an urgent injunction was argued fiercely in the High Court until mid-afternoon.
Napthine seems to be determined to deny the public a fair hearing on this and to let people decide at the election.
His barrister Ron Merkel QC told the court the government's economic modelling for East-West Link is deceptive and misleading, and that it's committing Victoria to hundreds of millions of dollars of losses. He said the government's own economic modelling standards show the project will return just 80 cents for every dollar invested. But the Victorian Solicitor General Stephen McLeish SC maintained it will generate $1.40 per dollar spent. And he repeated claims the delay could lead to a $145 million cost blowout. Lawyers for East-West Connect, the consortium chosen to build the project, told the court they'd lose $435,000 for each week of delay. In the end, those projected losses swung the case. Justice Susan Crennan dismissed the application to delay the signing of the contracts, saying the cost to the government and East West Connect outweighed Anthony Murphy's arguments.
Obviously it's disappointing. We were denied an injunction today in the High Court.
But he still has other options. Earlier today, the Court of Appeal granted him a retrial in his bid to access the government's business case for the project.
We still think we're going to win the overall campaign. The contracts can be overturned.
But that's a matter for the court to decide. Ashlyn McGee, ABC News, Melbourne.